Hello everyone, and welcome to Majoring in the Minors, a weekly series where we cover the events surrounding the North American Academy scene. The league has just kicked off several days ago, and the standings are what no one has expected so far. Both the winner and the runner-up of spring, Cloud9 and Evil Geniuses respectively, sit at the bottom of the standings. Meanwhile, FlyQuest Academy, with no roster movement after reeling into an 8th place finish, now sits with Golden Guardians, 100 Thieves, and TSM at first place with a 2-0 start. It's worth mentioning that FlyQuest started 2-0 in spring also, but they had played against CLG and Immortals, the only two teams which finished below FlyQuest. Meanwhile, at this split, they've already defeated Cloud9, a team projected to be at the top after winning spring split. Since the league has just begun, a big focus is on the new rookies some of the teams have brought on. Right now, there are currently 5 rookies starting in Academy: 100 Thieves Pume, Cloud9 Tomo, Golden Guardians Chime, TSM Winston, and Team Liquid Yama. Out of all of these, I'd probably say the best performer so far has been Pume, and the worst has been Yama, but truthfully, I haven't been particularly impressed by any of them. I think the best rookie to start with would be Pume. It was promoted from 100 Thieves Next, which is a team competing in the North American amateur scene in the Scouting Ground circuit. In short, it's a team below Academy to introduce raw talent to competitive play. In 100 Thieves Next, Pume was consistently the first or second best player, perhaps only behind Kenby. Pume was known for his hook and melee supports, superior tank positioning, and active early games. These trends were repeated in Academy, as he sports a high KP percentage, only behind Treats and Hakuho, two supports who should not be in Academy. This weekend, Pume picked Nautilus and Tarek, the former of which he was certainly known for in the amateur scene. Pume is by far the best rookie, but needs a lot of growing to do. In 100 Thieves Academy versus Cloud9 Academy, 11 minutes in, one of the worst turret dives I've ever seen transpires. Contracts executes a low-health Tomo with a quick combo. Pume, Prismal, and Contracts box Diamond's tower in order to execute a fairly easy dive. Pume is high health and has Aftershock. When he takes aggro, the turret will deal no damage to him for around 2 shots. If he wants to execute this perfectly, he will draw aggro with Nautilus E, tank a shot, auto-attack Thresh to proc Aftershock while the turret heats up, and then while his team kills Thresh, he will leave the tower range and drop aggro. However, what happens next is unfortunate. Pume takes a shot before the dive even starts, losing a good chunk of health. 100 Thieves decide to dive anyway, and Pume goes in. Palafox begins to channel his teleport. At this point, Fake God will almost certainly have made it known that he has teleport advantage, so it's obviously Palafox who is teleporting. Pume walks up to Diamond, cancels an auto, and then walks away. Honestly, if this auto did come out, it wouldn't have mattered, because Prismal screwed up too by taking aggro. This dive is not a disaster yet though. If Diamond can't get Aftershock, Contracts and Pume should have just enough damage to execute Diamond with Pume's Ignite. Furthermore, Fake God is teleporting in to counter Palafox's teleport, and Saligo is roaming from mid lane. After Prismal exits tower range, Contracts takes aggro after Pume displays indecision and dies. An insane bubble from Saligo hits Palafox on the entry, and Fake God cleans up Palafox while Pume leaves, having not once taken aggro. This might seem like nitpicking, but if Fake God didn't teleport and Saligo didn't roam, this play would have been a complete disaster. 100 Thieves almost certainly executed with this knowledge, but realistically, Contracts didn't need to die here if Pume and Prismal controlled tower aggro better. In another situation in the same game, Pume makes an extremely questionable engage onto Diamond, and realistically, this should never happen. Pume has Vision of Fudge, Diamond has Aftershock, and Saligo is far. Their items look okay, so looking for a fight isn't bad here, but they will lose a straight team fight, since they're at a large gold disadvantage, and Cloud9 has a strictly better composition for team fighting. Pume stopwatches early and wastes his Aftershock, even though Cloud9 hardly have any follow-up CC, and Pume gets destroyed after Fudge gets to close the gap. This play is extremely confusing, because there's no way anyone else in 100 Thieves is calling for an engage, judging by their positioning relative to Pume. This looks a lot like Pume being way too trigger-happy, combined with poor mechanical execution and the layering of his invulnerabilities. 100 Thieves was able to win this fight in spite of this, due to Cloud9's poor team fight positioning and the re-engage. The rest of this game is pretty textbook. Pume does okay, and the rest of his deaths were consequences of tank positioning, which makes dying unavoidable. That being said, these two plays, and especially the second one, should never really happen, and showcase Pume's weaknesses. He's had an okay start, and he has a fantastic support group, but the things I'd really like to see Pume improve on would be his cross-map proactivity. Both against Cloud9 and Evil Geniuses, Pume spent a lot of his time around Prismal, even outside of the laning phase. There's nothing necessarily wrong with this, but in particular against Cloud9, I could see a lot of opportunities where Prismal would be perfectly safe and allowed to collect farm and solo experience if Pume were to make plays with Contracts, which leads into the second point. Create positive synergy with Contracts. Contracts has been questionable as a player for the last year, but he is certainly an extremely valuable jungler in the early game. 100 Academy have the third highest gold delta out of 15, due in a large factor to Contracts' superior early game pathing. Furthermore, Contracts is the fourth highest KP for jungler so far, and second if you remove players who have played in the LCS. There's no doubt in my mind that Pume and Contracts could be an extremely deadly jungle support 2v2, but so far there have been very apparent communication issues. The final thing I'd like to see Pume improve on is improving his game sense. This one is pretty nebulous, but it ties directly into point 1 and most directly refers to the second play we covered. Pume absolutely needs to not tunnel onto engages and understand where his team is currently positioning relative to him. Also, stop watching nothing while his aftershock was extremely tilting. Pume can be good, and he has a relatively high skill floor already, but I'm not convinced entirely yet. The next player I'd like to talk about is Golden Guardian support Chime. I'll declare my bias in advance in saying that I've worked with Chime before and have nothing but positive experiences with his attitude. That being said, he was a very criticized pickup by Golden Guardians due to his poor performance in Amateur with Supernova, where he got benched for Papa Chow. One of the things I was excited for with Chime was his early game proactivity, which is something I continuously made notes of when observing or describing his play. I don't think Hard is an especially good jungler, even for Academy, but I do think Chime and Hard do display good synergy. He continually is at the right place at the right time, which is something Chime has always been good at. That being said, Chime's mechanics are pretty bad, which has been true for a while. His Thresh game against TL featured some questionable positioning, a few good hooks, and a lot of avoidable deaths. His game against Dignitas involved Chime and Keith walking towards JJ's Leona and killing themselves. While I would like to talk about Chime's laning, he's laning with Smurf 80 carry god Keith, so there's no point. So far, I actually think Chime has been the second best rookie so far, but his competition has been quite bad, and I think Chime is one of the biggest beneficiary of good teammates so far. BlazeOlive and Zion Spartan are 1v9 Smurfs in both games Golden Guardians have played. I think Chime can potentially be good, but the things he needs to improve on are difficult. He can either further index into his roaming playstyle, relying on Keith's strong laning relative to Academy AD carries, or he can actually become a good player by somehow improving his general mechanics and game knowledge. Either way, Chime is not on a great trajectory so far and will need to improve to maintain his Academy position, but he doesn't need to climb far relative to the other rookies. I just mentioned Chime was carried by his teammates, but he is not the worst player in this regard. That would be Winston. Winston was a relatively exciting signing for TSM, and he was signed as a part of the TSM Scouting Grounds program, but so far he has been looking very bad. He has the lowest kill participation out of any jungler, by far the lowest KDA across the 2-0 junglers despite not playing engaged tanks, and extremely questionable pathing. That being said, his two opponents were Grig and Dardoch, two players with massive history in LCS. However, compared to them, Winston has a massive advantage, and that his bottom lane is by far the best bottom lane Academy. His mid laner is a superstar, and his top laner can play both Ornn and Gangplank, so he's basically LCS ready. The play I'd like to highlight on Winston is against Team Liquid, where after a failed dive and burning Yasui's teleport, Winston decides to greed for Scuttlecrab without flash after TSM clearly sees both Yasui and Yama leave lane. This is one of the most cringe plays I've seen this week and results in first blood going to Team Liquid. Grig also gets his mark on Raptors afterwards due to this play, which makes this play even more awful. Another statistic I'd really like to make apparent is Winston has the lowest CS at 15 delta, relative to all other junglers at -21. This combined with his lowest KP across all junglers in Academy makes it apparent to how bad Winston is at this point. Winston has never acquired First Herald and only has one First Dragon. TSM actually have a very low game time relative to their team-wide gold at 15 delta. In fact, out of all of the 2-0 teams, TSM have the lowest gold at 15 delta, and they have the lowest game time in the entire league. Winston is a god at getting carried. I know it sounds like this has only been me criticizing Winston, but he does have some very good qualities to him. His mechanics and teamfighting are very good. This will sound like a meme, but the Trundle Pillar against Dignitas likely single-handedly won them the fight. I generally think TSM's drafts are really good relative to how the team plays, but I know for a fact from his time in Collegiate that Winston has the potential to be a very mechanical and aggressive jungler, and putting him on Trundle 2 games doesn't really let him show his strength. I know I just ragged on Winston for having the worst statistics in Academy, but I'd really like to see him off Trundle and onto a champion like Lee Sin or Graves, even if it means Evolved may have to back down a little in the draft. It's worth experimenting with more than one style. I think Winston by far is the player that needs more time in order to truly assess relative to the other rookies, and that's why I put him in the middle. Tomo was a hotly regarded signing for Cloud9 after King's visa wasn't able to get renewed due to coronavirus. Tomo was great in Collegiate, made Harrisburg University likely the best team in 2020 until the tournament was cancelled. Otherwise, he wasn't especially accomplished in Amateur, but did have a good showing in 2019 Scouting Grounds. So far, Tomo has looked very good in lane, but this is confounded by having exemplary support in Diamond. He is tied third with Apollo for having the CSD at 15 across the league for 80 carries. Tomo's real issues are with his game sense, which is very common for rookies entering Academy, and something that's particularly important for ADCs and junglers. In Cloud9 Academy versus Warrior Thieves Academy, Tomo dies to what's likely the most obvious turret dive of all time. Tomo can clearly see Pume's positioning giving away where Contrax is, and Tomo still face checks the bush and dies. Later in the game, Diamond hits an insane hook onto Zoe, but the follow-up is too late, and Cloud9 chase over the wall on Zoe and get AoE'd by Prismal's Aphelios. Cloud9 knows Aphelios' flamethrower, which makes this further questionable. This is a team-wide mistake, but shows how Tomo alongside the rest of Cloud9 are very prone to tunneling. Speaking of tunneling, in Cloud9 vs FlyQuest, Tomo throws a very winnable game by tunneling onto Fnatic's Lee Sin, and Arcane shifting away from his front line, right next to the two full health carries in FlyQuest. Honestly, while I think C9's drafts have been good, particularly the Cassiopeia on blue side round 2 against the Aphelios, which baits Zoe and allows Palafox to gain a counter, I think Tomo's weaknesses are highlighted by Palafox playing exclusively in Shanner's mid lane. In each scrim I've seen of Academy and Amateur, Lulu has never worked, and Karma has sometimes worked with things like Graves and Kindred. These drafts rely on either a strong carry jungler or a strong AD carry in order to compensate for the lack of high econ damage that mid lane typically supplies, and Tomo is not yet ready to supply that for his team. Overall, I think Tomo is seriously lacking right now, but I think he'd look a lot better if Palafox was on champion that also allowed him to showcase his talent. Tomo is a secondary carry right now, and he plays like it, despite draft putting him in the position of a primary carry. Tomo's game sense needs to improve. His laning is fine, but he tunnels in teamfights way too often, and it makes Cloud9 lose as a result. The worst rookie is Yama. I was skeptical of his acquisition from day one, and it's emblematic of Team Liquid's bad perspective surrounding Academy. To be blunt, Yama was very bad in Amateur and lost to meme tier teams. I'm trying hard not to be mean, but Yama just shouldn't be here, and was only acquired due to his high solo queue rating. I know that the point of Academy is to develop players, but I also think players should be selected for their gameplay and not necessarily their rank. Yama has never looked good and competitive. Additionally, TLA has been known to drop players after one split of mediocre performance despite having a relatively good track record, which when you add these two things up make no sense at all. You either choose new players you aim to develop over a long term, or you pick up players who already have amateur or collegiate experience and have developed in a competitive environment. You can work on refining them. Picking up Yama feels like a massive waste for a spot when history has shown us that it's likely they'll kick him off if he doesn't perform. Yama is part of the worst bottom lane in the league. I understand that Rakara is bad, but with one of the strongest topsides in the league, you should be able to get something done. I also understand that Grigg is super inconsistent and generally not good, but for Academy, he's likely still above average. Hisui is great, and Jenkins is relatively good. There's no excuse to be this much of a liability. Yama has the lowest KP out of any support, and the second lowest KDA in the entire league, only above Grigg. I know that the Grigg memes will come from this, but honestly, he played Olaf against Golden Guardians, and against a shit matchup like Olaf vs Trundle, while Ablaze Olive on Syndra. It's extremely difficult to not die in fights. Yama played Yuumi in this game, and while he looked better than on the Nautilus against TSM, it's Yuumi. You're really not doing yourself any favors. Also, man, I really hate Team Liquid's drafts. I understand that Yuumi Ezreal is a solid bottom lane that plays to scale. I also understand that Olaf works with Yuumi and Echo counters Syndra, but why would you ever try to play a composition like this while Trundle is still up, and just allow Syndra to deal true damage to the Olaf you're trying to stampede into your team? It just feels like such a disaster. Something that's pretty typical of these bottom tier teams is their questionable drafts. All that needs to be said about TL is this teamfight against TSM, where Jenkins TPs weirdly and TL are extremely slow to follow up. It's very obvious that Jenkins is tilted out of his mind in this game, and it feels like no one is communicating anything. With his bottom lane, I really don't blame him either. Grigg played poorly too, and to be blunt, I just never really want to see him on Kindred in my entire life. Yama is bad, but TL's roster is a complete train wreck, and I have no clue who thought this combination of players was a good idea. Why did you get rid of Cow? Why is Auto Orange out of Academy? Why are you Tuesdaying Yasui? I know most organizations are probably hesitant to pick up Papa Chow, but even Shady is still available. Why did you get rid of Shoryu? Why are you keeping Rakara? Value, Andy Bendy, and Cake are all on the market, and Asta was a free agent until Dignitas signed him relatively late into the offseason. I know this doesn't have much to do with Yama himself, but it's more so indicative that not only is Yama a bad fit for Team Liquid, but that Team Liquid's perspective on Academy is a joke. I feel bad for Yaltz because I know he is a very smart person, but I feel like his organization is really letting him and his players down. So, that's it. A lot of other interesting things happened in Week 1 of Academy also. CLG won, that was cool. Dardoch showed us why he is an Academy, Smithy showed us why he should not be an Academy, Science Spartan put on a great performance and showed us why he should be considered for an LCS spot, and Huni.
Get you double TP, here comes Giyu as well, Huni's already here to equalize.
Yikes. That's all for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back next week for episode 2 of Majoring in the Minors. Have a nice week.